Hello again, it's me, Sidney, with Chapter 5 of Pinocchio by Carlo Colodi. Sit back and hopefully you'll enjoy. The following day, Fire Eater called Pinocchio on one side and asked him, "What is your father's name?" "Geppetto." "And what trade does he follow?" "He is a beggar." "Does he gain much?" "Gain much? Why, he has never a penny in his pocket. Only think, to buy a spelling book for me to go to school, he was obliged to sell his only coat." "Oh, poor devil. I feel almost sorry for him. Here are 5 gold pieces. Go at once, take them to him with my compliments." You can easily understand that Pinocchio thanked the showman 1,000 times. He embraced all the puppets of the company one by one, even to the gendarmes, and beside himself with delight set out to return home. But he had not gone far when he met on the road a fox, lame of one foot, and a cat, blind in both eyes, who were going along helping each other like good companions in misfortune. The fox walked leaning on the cat, and the cat was guided by the fox. "Good day, Pinocchio," said the fox, accosting him politely. "How do you come to know my name?" asked the puppet. "I know your father well." "Where did you see him?" "I saw him yesterday at the door of his house." "And what was he doing?" "He was in his shirt sleeves and shivering with cold." "Poor papa, but that is over. For the future we shall shiver no more." "Why?" "Because I am become a gentleman." "Gentleman? You?" said the fox, and he began to laugh rudely and scornfully. The cat also began to laugh, but to conceal it she combed her whiskers with her forepaws. "There is little to laugh at," cried Pinocchio angrily. "If you know anything about it, you can see that these are 5 gold pieces." And he pulled out the money that the Fire Eater had given him. At the sympathetic ring of the money, the fox stretched out the paw that he seemed crippled, and the cat opened wide 2 eyes that looked like 2 green lanterns. It is a truth that she shut them again, and so quickly that Pinocchio observed nothing. "And now," asked the fox, "what are you going to do with all that money?" "First of all," answered the puppet, "I intend to buy a new coat for my papa, and then I will buy a spelling book for myself, for I wish to go to school and study in earnest." "Look at me," said the fox. "Through my foolish passion for study, I have lost a leg." "Oh, look at me," said the cat. "Through my foolish passion for study, I have lost the sight of both of my eyes." At that moment, a white blackbird was perched on the hedge by the road, began his usual song, and said, "Pinocchio, don't listen to the advice of bad companions. If you do, you will repent it." Would you like to make 5 miserable sovereigns, 100, 1,000, 2,000? said the fox. I think so. But in what way?" "Go with us to the land of the owls." Pinocchio reflected a moment, and then he said resolutely, No, I will not go. I will return home to my papa, who is waiting for me. I have indeed been a bad son, and the talking cricket was right when he said, 'Disobedient boys never come to any good in the world. I have found it to my cost, for many misfortunes have happened to me. Even yesterday in Fire Eater's house I ran the risk. Oh, it makes me shudder only to think of it. Well then, said the fox, you are quite decided to go home. Go, and so much the worse for you. So much the worse for you, repeated the cat. Between today and tomorrow, your 5 sovereigns would have become 2,000. 2,000, repeated the cat. But how is that possible? I will explain it at once, said the fox. You must know that in the land of the owls there is a field called the Field of Miracles. In this field you must dig a little hole, and you put into it, we shall say, 1 gold sovereign. You then cover up the hole with a little earth. You must water it with 2 pails of water from the fountain, then sprinkle it with 2 pinches of salt. When night comes, you can go quietly to bed. During the night, the gold piece will grow and flower, and in the morning when you get up and return to the field, you will find a beautiful tree laden with as many gold sovereigns as a fine ear of corn has grains in the month of June. Oh, how delightful! cried Pinocchio, dancing for joy. As soon as ever I have obtained these sovereigns, I will keep 2,000 for myself, and 500 I will make a present to you two. A present to us? Cried the fox with indignation and appearing much offended. What are you dreaming of? What are you dreaming of? Repeated the cat. We do not work, said the fox, for dirty interest. We work solely to enrich others. Others, repeated the cat. What good people, thought Pinocchio to himself, and forgetting there and then his papa, the new coat, the spelling book, and all his good resolutions, he said to the fox and the cat, Let us all be off at once. I will go with you. They walked and walked, until at last, towards evening, they arrived, dead tired, at the inn of the Red Crawfish. Let us stop here a little, said the fox, for food and the rest. We will start again at midnight, so as to arrive at the Field of Miracles by dawn tomorrow morning. When they had supped, the fox said to the host, Give us 2 good rooms, one for Mr. Pinocchio, and the other for me and my companion. We will snatch a little sleep before we leave. Remember, however, that at midnight we wish to be called to continue our journey. Yes, gentlemen, answered the host, and he winked at the fox and the cat, as much to say, I know what you two are up to. We understand one another. No sooner had Pinocchio got into bed than he fell asleep at once and began to dream. After some time he was suddenly wakened by 3 violent blows on the door of his room. It was the host who had come to tell him that midnight had struck. Are my companions ready? asked the puppet. Ready? Why, they left 2 hours ago. Why were they in such a hurry? Because the cat had received a message so that her eldest kitten was ill with chilblains. Did they pay for supper? What are you thinking? They are much too well educated to dream of offering such an insult to a gentleman like you. What a pity. It is an insult that would have given me so much pleasure, said Pinocchio, scratching his head. He then asked, And where did my good friends say they would wait for me? At the Field of Miracles tomorrow morning at daybreak. Pinocchio paid a sovereign for his supper and that of his companions, and then left. Outside the inn, it was so pitch dark that he had almost to grope his way. As he was walking along, he saw a little insect shining dimly on the trunk of a tree, like a night light in a lamp of transparent china. "Who are you?" "I am the ghost of the talking cricket," answered the insect in a low voice, so weak and faint that it seemed to come from the other world. "I want to give you some advice. Go back and take the 4 sovereigns that you have left to your poor father, who is weeping and in despair because you have never returned to him. By tomorrow my papa will be a gentleman, for these 4 sovereigns will have become 2,000. Don't trust, my boy, to those who promise to make you rich in a day. Usually they are either mad or rogues. Give ear to me and go back. On the contrary, I am determined to go on. Remember that boys who will have their own way sooner or later repent it. Always the same stories. Good night, Mr. Cricket." "Good night, Pinocchio, and may heaven preserve you from dangers and from assassins." No sooner had he said these words than the talking cricket vanished suddenly like a light that had been blown out, and the road became darker than ever. "Really," said the puppet to himself as he resumed his journey, "how unfortunate we poor boys are. Everybody scolds us, everybody admonishes us, everybody gives us good advice." But Pinocchio had not time to finish his reasoning, for he heard a slight rustle of leaves behind him. He turned to look and saw in the gloom 2 evil-looking black figures, completely enveloped in charcoal sacks. They were running after him on tiptoe and making great leaps like 2 phantoms. Not knowing where to hide his gold pieces, he put them in his mouth, precisely under his tongue. Then he tried to escape, but he had not gone a step when he felt himself seized by the arm and heard 2 horrid sepulchral voices saying to him, "Your money or your life!" Pinocchio, not being able to answer in words owing to the money that was in his mouth, made 1,000 low bows and 1,000 pantomimes. He tried thus to make the 2 muffled figures, whose eyes were only visible through the holes in their sacks, understand that he was a poor puppet, and that he had not as much as a false farthing in his pocket. "Come now, less nonsense, and out with the money," cried the 2 brigands threateningly, and the puppet made a gesture with his hands to signify, "I have got none." "Deliver up your money or you are dead," said the tallest of the brigands. "Dead," repeated the other, "and after we have killed you, we will also kill your father. Also your father." "No, not my poor papa," cried Pinocchio in a despairing tone, and as he said it, the sovereigns clinked in his mouth. "You rascal! Then you have hidden your money under your tongue. Spit it out at once." But Pinocchio was obdurate. You pretend to be deaf, do you? Wait a minute. Leave it to us. Find a means to make you spit it out." And one of them seized the puppet by the end of his nose, and the other took him by the chin and began to pull them brutally, the one up and the other down, to constrain him to open his mouth. But it was all to no purpose. Pinocchio's mouth seemed to be nailed and riveted together. Then the shorter assassin drew out an ugly knife and tried to force it between his lips like a lever or a chisel. But Pinocchio, as quick as lightning, caught his hand. Imagine his astonishment when instead of a hand he perceived that it was a cat's paw. He used his nails to such purpose that he succeeded in liberating himself, and jumping the hedge began to fly across the country, the assassins running after him like 2 dogs chasing a hare. The day began to break, and they were still pursuing him. Suddenly, Pinocchio found his way barred by a wide, deep ditch, full of dirty water the colour of coffee. What was he to do? 1, 2, 3, cried the puppet, and making a rush, he sprang to the other side. The assassins also jumped, but not having measured the distance properly, splash, splash, they fell into the very muddy ditch. Pinocchio, who heard the plunge and the splashing of the water, shouted out, "Ha ha!" laughing, and without stopping, "Ha! A fine bath to you, gentlemen assassins!" And he felt convinced that they were drowned. When turning to look, he perceived that on the contrary they were both still running after him, still enveloped in their sacks, with the water dripping from them as if they had been 2 hollow baskets. At this sight, the puppet's courage failed him, and he was on the point of throwing himself on the ground and giving himself over for lost. Oh, if I have breath to reach that house, he said to himself, perhaps I should be saved. And without delaying an instant, he recommenced running for his life through the wood, and the assassins after him. At last he arrived quite breathless at the door of the house and knocked with great violence, for he had heard the sound of steps approaching him and the heavy panting of his persecutors. No one answered. He began, in desperation, to kick and pummel the door with all his might. The window then suddenly opened, and a beautiful child appeared at it. She had blue hair and a face as white as a waxen image. Her eyes were closed and her hands were crossed on her breast. Without moving her lips in the least, she said in a voice that seemed to come from the other world, "In this house there is no one. They are all dead." "Then at least open the door for me yourself," shouted Pinocchio. "I am dead also." Having said this, she immediately disappeared, and the window was closed again without the slightest noise. "Oh, beautiful child with the blue hair, please," cried Pinocchio, "open the door for pity's sake. Have compassion on a poor boy pursued by assassins." But he could not finish the word, for he felt himself seized by the collar, and the same 2 horrible voices said to him threateningly, "You shall not escape again." The puppet was taken with such a violent fit of trembling that the joints of his wooden legs began to creak, and the sovereigns hidden under his tongue to clink. "Now then," demanded the assassins, "will you open your mouth? Yes or no?" "Ah, no answer." And drawing out 2 long, horrid knives as sharp as razors, clash! They attempted to stab him twice, but the puppet, luckily for him, was made of very hard wood. The knives therefore broke into 1,000 pieces, and the assassins were left with the wooden handles in their hands, staring at each other. "I see what we must do," said one of them. "He must be hung. Let us hang him. Let us hang him," repeated the other. Without loss of time, they tied his arms behind him, passed a running noose around his throat, and hung him to the branch of a tree called the Big Oak. "Goodbye till tomorrow. Let us hope that when we return you will be polite enough to allow us to be found quite dead, with your eyes and your mouth wide open." And they walked off. In the meantime, a tempestuous northerly wind began to blow and roar, and he beat the poor puppet as he hung from side to side, making him swing violently like the clapper of a bell ringing for a wedding. And the swinging gave him atrocious spasms, and the running noose, becoming still tighter round his throat, took away his breath. Little by little his eyes began to grow dim. But although he felt that death was near, he still continued to hope that some charitable person would come to his assistance before it was too late. But when, after waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, he found that no one came, he remembered his old poor father, and thinking he was dying, he stammered out, "Oh, Papa, Papa, if only you were here." His breath failed him. He could say no more. He shut his eyes, opened his mouth, stretched his legs, gave a long shudder, and hung stiff and insensible.